Good evening. I'm Scott M. Graves, founder of SM Graves Associates and M, the Media Project.
I'm Scott J. Graves, local city councilor here in Gardner for years, and welcome.
You are listening to Scott's on the Rocks Politica. Scott, it's exciting to be here today. It's been kind of an interesting week for all of us, and we're nearing the end of 2020. And, even though this has been a wild year, I would posit to you that this year is going to go down in history like similar years, like maybe 1865 or 1929, or it's just,
Yeah,
it's one of those
like
years where you're like, okay, it's done. Move on.
it's been quite the thing. It really has, and it looks like it's gonna go right to the very end too, and
Right.
maybe a
It's
little
like,
beyond. It's gonna poison 2021 too. It looks like, so we'll see
the
what happens.
shiznat is totally hyper concentrating. It's like a black hole in the universe. It's just sucking in all the gravity and being like, we're going to take everyone with us before it's the new year.
Wow.
Um, so today, a big part of today's episode, we decided beforehand, we're going to get back into, as we said a few weeks ago, we're going to get back into the subject of conflict of interest as it pertains to our little hamlet here, the great fast city of Gardner, Massachusetts. Start us off, okay? Start us off on conflict of interest and why this should be important to our listeners here.
Well, most of us now the conflict of interest laws. They apply to every public employee. So if you're a public employee, you got to make sure that you're complying with these conflict of interest laws. And there's several sections. Like I'm looking right now, it's Mass General Laws, Chapter 268, Capital A, and there's several sections. But for most of us, and I hate to say there's two main sections, but there's two sections that have the pitfalls for the unwary, if you will, where you can easily step over the line and not even realize you're doing it. Now, I I
That's
thought
where
it was
that's where being a smart person comes into play, and just keeping that in the back of your mind because both of us in various ways have interacted as public figures of various kinds or bureaucrats
right.
or both, right? And we understand that, like, the first step is keep in the back of your mind that, is this a violation, or am I getting close to a violation? I just have to be careful, right? And it's a reference point. You keep going back and you keep making sure that your
Yeah,
processes are
I,
legal.
yeah, and I always approached it. Knock on wood, like I said, you could just unwittingly fall into something. Gosh, shit! I can't believe I was that stupid. Just not that you're a corrupt individual. It's just that you weren't really thinking. Sometimes we all do it. You just step into something. You're like, damn, I wasn't thinking, or you just had a lapse of reason or whatever. So, but I've always, knock on wood, been able to stay away from all that because, first of all, you don't really even need to be smart. Because you'd said it, that helps, but you need to be obviously just a forthright, honest person, and you have to just use your common sense, right? So what I'm getting at is that, like for instance, you can't take part, and it's like, say you have a job and an issue comes up and you're doing your job and you have to look at this issue, whether you have a vote or whether you have to approve something or whether somebody needs your input on something, and it's about a license or an application or something in which either you have a personal interest or somebody that's close to you, a family member or something, has an interest. You might think, well, my cousin's applying for a liquor license, and I don't have anything to do with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and take part in this because I don't know what he's doing. It's all up to him. You just violated sometimes you can. So what the conflict of interest law lets you do is sometimes if you think there might be a conflict, but um, the, the law says if your supervisor believes that you can still take part in it, and it won't violate the conflict
Take
of
part
interest
in
law.
whatever
You
that
could do a
the
disclosure.
transaction is. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and you could do a public disclosure. So you disclose to the public that, okay, this is the potential appearance of impropriety, or this is the potential conflict I have, and so everybody knows about it. So then when you're actually doing it, it's not like you're trying to sneak it through or anything. Like, you were open about it, and the statute allows for that type of thing. Like, there's some things you just can't get permission to do, obviously, but some things where there's a gray area, you can do that. Um, but, like, for instance, this is the one that gets people in trouble. It's Section 23, and it's Section A. Section 23B2, and there's two subsections to two. And the second one is, you can't use or attempt to use your official position to secure to secure for yourself unwarranted privileges or exemptions which are of substantial value, and which are not properly available to similarly situated individuals. So something like that would, like, say you were just a public employee and you found out that the city had this piece of property that was going out for bid that was available, and you somehow, but it wasn't out to the public yet, and you just heard about it, and you went back door and you told one of your friends, hey, there's going to be some property available pretty soon, but the public doesn't know about it yet.
Right.
You
Right.
just
Haven't
used
been
your office.
disclosed. It's almost like insider trading. It's like, well,
Yeah, and in a way,
this is a
like, say
public
say you have
disclosure.
nothing to do with it. You're just telling somebody you know about it, but you used your office to get the information. You can't do that. And so if you just remember that the citizenry, the public owns the city. They own
Correct.
your position. I'm a city councilor. They own my seat. They own my vote. They own everything about me as a public figure, right? Everything. If you think about
What
that,
you've given isn't, by the way, we've said this before, but to remind our listeners again, that's the public trust. The public trust is
yeah,
abstract, but it's also literal. It is these things that you just listed.
yeah, so a lot of public officials, they get in there and like, oh, hey, Hal, if you vote with me on this one, I'll vote with you the next time. That happens all the time. I've never ever done that once in my life. And you can ask anybody who's ever been a city councilor or anybody who's ever worked at City Hall, and they might say I'm an asshole, but they'll say he does not trade his vote, and he'll never be a consensus builder because that's the way he is, right? So I've always looked at it that this way. It's and I get it. Sometimes you have to do that in order to get things done. For me,
What do you
it's
mean?
worked for
What do you mean by I have to do that to get things done? You talking about consensus, building
yeah,
consensus?
consensus. Some people have a theory of government and a theory of getting things done, doing it that way. And I think if you look at it my way, if and I've always been this way, independent, and I say, well, this is the way we should be doing it. And a lot of times I've been able to turn people's minds quite often, not by going to them and say, hey, you should come with me on this issue, and you should agree with me because XYZ. I never do that either. Ask them. I don't call them and say, hey, you got to vote with me on this thing. I've never done that. As a matter of fact, I've been doing this for 17 years. I've never picked up the phone or emailed somebody saying, hey, you got to vote with me on this, and this is why. I'll send out emails saying, hey, this is what I think should happen here, but I don't tell them how they should think, or you know what I'm saying? So
You're not on the
sometimes,
phone a la LBJ in '63 or '64, right? And
yeah, yeah.
I
Or
can't I
hey,
can't think of any LBJ Texas oriented euphemisms to give, but he had some pretty good
LBJ.
one-liners.
So, anyways, I think if you just remember that it's the public trust, like you said, it's their seat, it's their government. It's kind of hard to get in trouble because you just think you're like, I don't know, if 20,000 people were looking at me right now, would I be doing that? And so if the answer is no, you just don't do it, or you call ethics. You can call ethics, and that's another thing. I think we talked about this before. Ethics under Chapter 2, not 268A, but 268B, Section 3. They
Yeah.
have a section. They have a section where if if you're a public employee and you have a question about something that you want to do, or you'd like to do, or that you're being called upon to do, and you're wondering about it, you can call ethics, and ethics and a lawyer, attorney for the ethics division, legal division, will call you back or pick up the phone and they'll talk to you about it.
I actually
Now
really
they
like that.
won't.
You know, you can call like an 800 number, be like, ethics?
Yeah.
I was thinking about bribing someone today.
Yeah. Is that
Okay,
okay?
it's not that obvious, but you know.
No, no, but you know what's good about that? You're actually talking to a ethics attorney, staff attorney, right?
Right,
And you can rely on what they're saying to you. Not
right.
within reason, obviously, but later if you get in trouble, you can say, "Well, I called ethics, and this is what they said to me."
And at the time, their opinion was this might be okay. Yeah, yeah. If I
Right?
do, if I commit to this the following ways, you know.
Yeah. So it takes the mens rea, if you will. It takes your corrupt intent out of the picture completely because you called ethics. And so anyways, it's a good thing to do, right? But the laws, I don't know, for some people maybe not, but they're pretty straightforward. So what happened to me in one case, again, not to bring up John Flick again, but it's 100% to do with him. um, I was running for acting mayor, and I was also a candidate for mayor. Okay, so when I say I was running for mayor, that was because being city council president, when Mark Hawk quit the mayor's office and he said he was going to resign.
Right.
So in the second term, the one that he had just won the election for, he said that he was just going to take the oath and resign, right? So when he took the oath and resigned, whoever was council president was going to be automatically, there's no vote, there's no nothing at that point. You're automatically, by city charter, if the mayor is absent or the seat's vacant, the city council president's automatically, no vote, no nothing, automatically acting mayor. So when I say I was running for acting mayor, I was running for acting mayor, and I was running for mayor of Gardner to fill his seat that he had declined and he wasn't going to fill for the 2 years.
And he quit. Yeah.
Quit. So all of a sudden, I'm like, that's fine. I don't see any conflict of interest there, obviously. I mean, obviously, the executive runs for reelection. City councilors run for reelection. So if you're a legislator, if you're a legislator, you get to run for reelection. If you're an executive, now in Gardner, if you're the acting mayor, you're the executive by definition, because you can't be acting mayor unless there's no mayor. So the acting mayor is the default executor, and the mayor, when the mayor's there, is the executor. The executor, whether you're the acting mayor or the mayor, him or herself, you get to run for reelection. I don't know if that shocks our listeners. I'm going to say it again because this could be shocking to people. Now I'm going to bring this
Here
round
comes
full
a
circle.
second time, ladies and gentlemen.
Take your time because this might be shocking and stunning to people, but I'm going to take this round full circle, believe it or not. Now I'm going to say this might be shocking. A mayor gets to run for reelection in Gardner, and this might be shocking too. A city councilor gets to run for reelection. Now, in both instances, there's nothing violating the conflict of interest or if he or she does that. However, John Flick didn't send me anything. He started going around in the city of Gardner, and I'll tell you how I found out about it. He didn't have the temerity to tell me himself, which is odd, since he decided to call the ethics commission about me, got an answer, but didn't tell me about it, which that sounds odd if you ask me. But anyways,
That sounds a bit of oddity, yes.
Mark Hawk stops me in the hallway about 2-3 weeks later, and I was hearing grumblings from people, Nate Boudreau, Karen Harder, and some other people, and I'm like, and it was vague stuff like, oh, you can't be council president this time around because you're running for mayor, and that makes you acting mayor, and you can't do that. And I'm like, Nate, for instance, had said that to me, but it was really late. But I actually talked to him on the phone. I don't talk on the phone, but I wanted to actually find out exactly what he was talking about. So I said, what do you mean? And so when I pressed him on it, he's like, well, it's just my personal opinion that, because he couldn't get out of the fact that it's not unethical. So then he changed it into it being because his personal, which makes sense. He's entitled to his opinion. He thought that an acting mayor would be, obviously doesn't know me very well. he thought I'd be campaigning too much, trying to become mayor and all this, and I wouldn't be concentrating on my role as acting mayor, which,
Right.
and I'm
Well,
like, whatever.
but that's still let's make a distinction between
That's
what
not
may or may
unethical.
not logistically work in a professional setting,
Yeah,
and that's different. That's a separate issue from a conflict of interest or an
yeah,
ethics.
100%. So Nate's opinion, you're exactly right. Nate's opinion was that he just didn't think it's a good idea from a
Not a
logistical or practical.
professional. It's not a professional scenario
Yeah,
that he.
he just thought it was better that somebody else be. But the thing is, it originated. I don't know if it originated with Nate, but Mark Hawk, going back to that, stops me in the hallway after a finance committee meeting. He's already in Westminster full time as a town administrator. He goes, "Hey, Flick told me that ethics told him that you can't be a council president / acting mayor because you're running for mayor. You just can't do it. It's unethical."
Mm.
And his words were, "I think that's bullshit." And I'm like, yeah, that's not correct at all. But and I'm thinking, why is Flick saying that? And why would ethics say that, right?
We should make it clear to our listeners, right? Because sometimes you and I go at the speed of light here. So John
Yeah,
Flick it was at this time a year ago and is the city council, the city solicitor. So that
right.
is the lawyer appointed to handle all legal activity for the city of Gardner in this case.
Yeah, so I'm not
And
going to make a. It's a long.
he's telling you that an acting that that an acting mayor who's been appointed, who in our town by default, according to charter, always first goes to the city council president. If the standing mayor, if the elected mayor steps down or quits, in this case, quit, right? Should I
Yeah,
emphasize he quit? He quit. Okay,
yeah,
so. And what he's saying or said then a year ago is that you couldn't also then run duly for mayor of Gardner.
right. You couldn't be both a candidate. Flick said, and poor Flick, he only got this from the ethics commission. He said,
Except
which is
the ethics
another matter.
commission, you said,
But
we got
I know it's just so that so listeners can understand because it doesn't seem to make sense because it doesn't. Now, the city solicitor doesn't go to ethics and ask ethical questions about a city council or any other employee because he can't get information from ethics. They're prohibited by law to give the information to what they call a third party. When I say you can call ethics, they'll only talk to you. They'll only talk to the person who's asking the question about him or herself. So you have to be the person who they're talking about on the
right,
phone with.
right.
So, so first of all, he wouldn't call for that reason. Second of all, city solicitors know how to read laws. They don't need to get second opinions from other lawyers. And not to mention, if he got the opinion from ethics, he should have known right away that that's just like the most ludicrous opinion
Otherwise,
known to
if
man.
that opinion sticks, incumbents of any stripe couldn't run for reelection.
That's right. No, that's still standing too. Now, so Flick took it. Now, if you think that Flick is going to say, "I never said that" to Mark Clark, right? If you think that could happen, right? But Flick confirmed it to me in an email, so it's also in writing. He said that he got that from ethics, and not only that, a city councilor, if a city councilor, just not the council president, just the city councilor, is going to run for mayor, that city councilor also can't take part in anything that might influence the election for mayor. Now, everything a city councilor does, if you're running for mayor as a city councilor, right? Think about it. The citizenry judges everything we say or do as a city councilor. So if you're going to run for re-election or run for mayor, they watch your city council meetings. They see what you vote on. They see what you say. So everything you do is influencing your next election. So Flick's advice was, you can't take part in anything that might influence the next election. That means that city council might as well. So a city councilor and an acting mayor who wants to run for mayor, you
That-
either have to resign, you either have to resign, or deprive yourself of the right to run for elective office. That,
Which
now
doesn't
that
happen.
decision,
This is
now
just
that
not what
decision
happened.
is still standing. Now, what makes it even more squirrely and crazy, I got an ethics, so I get to call ethics too, and I get to get a legal advisory that's about me. So I call ethics, and ethics says, and somebody who was with me and was listening to this in the car, we were going to go hike Mount Wachusett, and we pulled over because he had called me back, and I'm like, you got to listen to this because I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, of course you can do it. Point blank, he goes, whatever they're telling you doesn't make any sense. Of course you can of course you can be council president, acting mayor, and run for mayor. He goes, there's no conflict of interest whatsoever. And he says, and if you want to go the extra mile on that if they're right, that means a mayor can never run for re-election. And I'm like, bingo, that's exactly what I've been saying. So not only is the legal opinion that was shared in early November about me, so
Right.
that no city council would vote for me for council president. Why would you vote for somebody as council president if it's illegal for them? Now,
Well, it would certainly
by the way,
seem, I'm speculating now. I'm speculating. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm speculating. It would seem like this is a tactic to muddy the waters to purposely make sure that you didn't become city council president first and foremost, and or it would compromise your ability to run for mayor. But if you could not be city council president, that had certain advantages, especially since the standing mayor, left his seat, and it would have advantages to people if in fact they had some other larger plan at work and needed to for you to not. Well, I think it all boiled down to this. Here's what I will speculate: it all would boil down to you running for mayor. If you could lose credibility by first losing as city council president, it would in some way muddy the waters for your run for mayor, because everybody by then knew you were going to run for mayor.
now everything you just said, that would make too much sense. And I'm not even going there for tonight because I'm just trying to explain. Like that's just because a person that's reasonable minded and has common sense would say, why would somebody do that if it was so outlandish? Why would somebody do that? And then you start thinking the way you're thinking. But I want to go back to so we've got a legal advisory from somebody. He's sharing it with people, telling the man to come tell me it. And then it's getting to other people, and there's other people that have got back to me through employees at City Hall. And so you've got one opinion from somebody that wasn't even supposed to get it, sharing it, and then I got it directly from ethics. I'm the person affected. I got it directly from ethics, 180 degrees, totally conflicting with the one that is being shared to affect this city council president slash acting mayor election. Now, the violation of the law we're talking about, 5 years in prison. So you get thrown in prison for 5 years. So if Flick was right, okay, if Flick was right, and this is the city proclamation, this is the city ruling that's still out there. So
Right.
one of the reasons why it should be resolved is because I'm going to be running for city councilor again, and there's other people running for city council for re-election. That ruling still stands, and you're facing 5 years prison time.
Just
Uh, and if
for
Mike
running as an
Nicholson,
incumbent?
well, if Mike Nicholson wants to run for re-election, he's facing 5 years prison time and a $10,000 fine. Okay, now so this isn't a joke. Like this isn't a joke about it. So when this was thrown in me on my lap, I looked and I'm like, are they gonna file? Is somebody gonna file? Like so, nobody filed a complaint against me. This was like an advisory saying you better watch what you're doing, and you better probably either bow out of the acting mayor race, so city council president, acting mayor race, or bow out of the mayor's race, right? Because or risk going to jail for 5 years. I mean, that's pretty ridiculous if you think about it. So being a lawyer, I'm looking at it going, And by the way, I didn't get my advisory till much later for various reasons. So I had this opinion in front of me, thinking that can't be right. But I stayed in the race and everything, right? So here's where conflict of interest gets scary. So you're an elected official. Um, you, somebody's just issued a ruling against you, and that's the Ethics Commission and the Law Department of the City of Gardner. They've issued this ruling against you. It's going to take some pretty good stones to say, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to risk the 5 years. But I had to watch what I was saying from that point forward. It's called chilling. It had a chilling effect, and it's also called self-censorship. You start self-censoring, like sitting there and sitting. So it's not good for a city councilor because you're like, I'd like to say something right now, but they're going to think that I'm just saying it because I'm running for mayor. And it was because of that friggin' ruling. So, but
Let me ask
so you could go on and on.
while you
Yeah.
say this, because all of this is good, valid information to what we're trying to the picture we're trying to paint tonight. Now,
Yeah, and it gives a good picture.
the um, is the actual ruling from ethics? Do we know at this point in the end of 2020 that that was legit? I understand that the city solicitor for the city of Gardner is saying this is the ruling that I received from ethics. But you were saying earlier, forgive me if this is wrong, but so I'm asking you to recharacterize it. But there's no proof that he actually received this from.
It's almost hard to believe, SMG. It's almost hard to believe.
Well, but I've lived
But
here
go ahead, go
15
ahead.
years,
Go
so
ahead.
it's kind of
You're right
it's kind
so
of
far.
pretty easy to believe. So, but it was never actually tracked back. In other words, do you know definitively that ethics gave him this decision?
Well, get this. Okay, I'm glad you asked that. So, I'm gonna hold my other thoughts while I stop talking for a second. So I asked Flick for, obviously, wouldn't anybody? After I got his email saying, yeah, I did say that stuff. I've got the email, obviously. I mean, so I said, well, who did you talk to at ethics? After I got mine, a couple weeks later, I said to Flick, I said, who did you talk to at ethics? What day was it? What time was it? What did you tell them? And what did they say to you? Flick said, and now I just asked him in an email informally, right? In other words, just send me an email back. Just send me an email back with that information. Flick says, the law department is in receipt of your Chapter 66 public records request, and we have no public records responsive to your request. So Flick's famous for taking my request as a city councilor and transforming them into this Chapter 66 public records request, which is a request for public records. So he probably didn't have any public records in writing to that effect because it was all on the phone, right? Of course he doesn't have records of that. So he basically said, go pound sand, you get zero information from me. So I'm like, okay. So I go to ethics. I say, ethics, you just gave me an opinion that says the exact opposite of the opinion that Flick says you gave him. So under Chapter 268B, Section 3G, the confidentiality agreement is breached. Therefore, you can give me your information about what I asked him, and he won't give
He's
it to
already
me.
shared it with you. Yes.
So now it's supposed to be confidential. But if somebody misconstrues what was stated, or you know,
File open. Yes. Yeah.
flirts with the
File
truth.
open for the purposes of seeking the truth. Yes.
But ethics says no, we can't give you any information. So I've got two actors against me. I've got two government actors against me in my race, which I'm already getting hammered in this race. I have $800 and Nicholson's got 40 grand, right?
So,
I've got like,
so now pull this in though, because this is all about about conflict of interest, and it's really about this conflict of interest, if there is one. The irony is there is one, but it's not the one that everyone thinks there is. So,
well, everybody's focused on this one, and all of November into all through December.
of
So
2020, yes. Of
19,
2020, yes.
of 19. And so on the city council, like even now, like I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to get somebody to run for council president, but this is when you start getting, like, I've never asked anybody for their vote. Ask them that too. I don't do that either. I got voted unanimously the year before because, I mean, when I was council president, got booted out. I had just gotten in unanimously, and I never asked for one vote. I never asked for a vote when I got there to begin with. But anyways, so all during December, and then Hawk was going to resign after January 6th. Now, our election for city council president / acting mayor was going to be January 6th. So this happened all through this. That's all that. That's the only conflict of interest that anybody was talking about. Now, think about it. If you're a city councilor, would you vote for somebody who can't hold that job? If you vote for that person and he gets there, first of all, he's going to go to jail for 5 years, and you just wasted your vote because he's going to be gone anyway. So why would you vote for that person? Think about it. Nobody in their right mind would vote for me.
Right.
It's illegal for me to hold the position.
Well, it seems like if we look at not just at a local but a national level for some time now, one tactic that's often used, one competitor to another to get the outcome that one wishes is, one tactic is to vilify the other person. Another is to simply muddy the waters. We see
disqualify them. How about disqualifying them?
Yeah, and that is ultimately what it is. We disqualify people by the following tactic. We muddy the waters about that person's credibility or their abilities or both, their capabilities to
How about their ethics? How about their ethics?
And their ethics.
That's the death knell. When you're an elected official, ethics is your death sentence.
And it's a particularly.
So here's the other thing, Scott. Not to interrupt you, but here's the other thing.
I have a problem with the fact that the set of tactics we're talking about is very cynical, because it assumes a lot of things about the voters too. It assumes that people don't read very much. It assumes that people will see it the first time and pay attention and not pay attention to any further dialogue on the subject matter. It's one of the worst characteristics of modern American politics. And I know that it has a long and storied past. When I say modern, I mean, this goes back to the beginning of the Republic. Any good read of the end of the 18th century newspapers in the first 2 or 3 federal elections, and you say, wow, this has been going on forever. It doesn't justify it. It doesn't make it a great tradition by any means. But now I want to pull it back in. So obviously, the reality is it's not an ethics violation. I'm talking in a deeper legal sense, right?
What I did by trying to run for mayor, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, because the reality is then no incumbents could ever run for office.
But let me keep your thought for a second though, because the people that look at it and don't know the law, the letter of the law, the black and white of it, will say, well, that kind of makes sense, because when he's acting mayor, he's going to be up there as council president, and then at the same time, he's going to be the executive. He's going to be walking around City Hall like he's the mayor with the sash. He's going to be making decisions. He's going to be signing documents as mayor, and he's going to have this advantage over everybody else because he's up there on this pedestal. He's got the authority. He's got the integrity. He's got the prominence of being not only the leader of the legislative body, but also the leader of the executive department, right? Which is all true. But guess what? It's not an unwarranted advantage, and it's not a willful advantage or an unfair advantage.
And it's not
just
also,
an advantage.
it's not also, by the way, I don't know if this is
Huh?
material or not. You can tell me if this is material or not, but it's also not an advantage that was brought on by you or whoever's in that seat. It's brought on by somebody leaving their position.
But it's a natural advantage in terms of the city charter says, who's the best person we should put in there if the mayor walks out, which is what happened. The mayor wins an election and he quits. Well, if that ever happens, who would be the best person to put there? Well, I guess the council president is next highest. So they contemplate. Yeah, so when the council president goes up there, he's probably, if he's the best person to be acting mayor, he's probably going to run for mayor as well, right? So it's like, if that's awkward to anybody, you got to check your premises, because, and this is what people would think, well, he's going to have, because people had a favorite candidate. Let's face it, okay? People had a favorite candidate, and they didn't want to say, well, Graves is going to have this advantage over the favorite candidate, right? Okay, I was a city official for 20 years. I was an 8-time elected city councilor, 30-year trial attorney. I have an office in Gardner for 30 years. I'm a homeowner. I raise my kids here. I'm a property owner. Maybe somebody like that should have an advantage for a couple months because the mayor just quit and walked out. Like I had no designs to run for mayor. It's just Hawk started this domino effect by his voluntary choices. And I was just going with the flow thinking, well, if I'm going to be acting mayor for a while, I might as well throw my hat in the ring. But here's the point now. So people are looking at me like, he's staying in the race. I wonder about his ethics because they just said he can't do it, but he's going
Correct.
to do it
Well,
anyway. So
this gets back to my
he must
suggestion
not
that
he must not care
it was
about
done to
ethics,
muddy
right?
those, it was done to muddy the ethical waters, whether it's really an ethics violation or not, to skew the campaign. Now, before I have some other questions, and they're going to get very pointed. Before I do that, though, I want to make it clear to everybody that could be listening. It's very easy for people when we're talking in the episodes we've done so far. When we're talking local politics. It's very easy for people to say they're just too. We've actually had at least one person at one point say we're too crusty old guys.
Salty.
Salty. I'm sorry, not crusty, salty, not crusty, salty. Excuse me. Not COVID. Okay, and that suddenly we're taking something and making it personal, and we're using the bandwidth of the medium of podcast and broadcast radio to to just basically spout personal gripes. And I
Well,
want
first of all,
here.
let me
Hold
stop
on.
you.
Hold on. Let me talk.
There's nothing wrong with that, by the
Well,
way.
but that's not what. Two things. That's not what's happening here.
No, I know.
And that's important to me to say. And it is because we're first and foremost, we started this podcast as part of a greater project, including this podcast, to explore financial models in creating robust local journalism again. Not because we have something against the old print newspaper model, but because the old print newspaper model is failing fiscally, and so many local newspapers, including our own, have been hollowed out, and the good, hardworking people working there just don't have the bandwidth themselves to properly report on everything, and to get controversial when you have to get controversial,
Especially local stuff.
and this especially local stuff, because their jobs are affected by it most.
You're not going to hear any. There wasn't one story about this.
No.
Not one.
Well, and in fact, we should mention that there has been some local press that is beginning to avoid even me on other unrelated and non-political topics.
There's nothing.
And we it seems like that would be because of things like this podcast. So now we get back to, all I can say is it's all out of love, and it's all out of getting a robust discussion again, and getting our engaged citizens that wish to be really asking questions like, wow, I got to think about this for myself. And we don't have answers all the time, but what we can certainly do is posit questions. Now I want to kind of not be a co-host for me. I just want to, it's sort of like an interview. I mean, I have a question for you. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you say to people listening to this podcast who say this is somehow sour grapes, or even if they say, yeah, you have a right to be mad, but we have to all get over it because, well, it's all under the what happened a year ago, and it is what it is. What do you say to those people? Why is this important still now? Why will it always be important?
Well, people are saying that, and there's a lot of reasons why. First of all, it's a major event of, let's call it, error. My opinion is based on the fact that nobody will give me any information on it. The two actors won't give me any information on it, and there's nobody else that was involved. It was state ethics and Flick, and I have the opinion from ethics that is 100% opposite from the one that was passed around as the state ruling. So, but here's the thing. You move on. We have moved on. I work with the mayor every day. You can ask him. I'm probably his biggest fan and his biggest critic at the same time. It's just the way I am. But if you think if you think I'm sour grapes, just watch the city council meetings and see what I do as a city councilor. It's not true. But if we allow these things to keep going, now, for instance, and I said this, that ruling is still out there, and it's going to affect the mayor. If he's running for re-election, he can't until that ruling's resolved. It's still out there. He can't run. He'll be going to jail for 5 years under that ruling.
We can make T-shirts that have his picture on it with like jail. No,
yeah, get out of jail free card by straightening it out. And city councilors too, because and this is if you have a financial, and this is what the law says, if you have a financial interest in a position, which a mayor is a paid position, city council is a paid position, if you have an interest in that position, you can't participate in any matter that financial interest has to do. Yeah. So their reasoning is, by being acting mayor, just breathing as acting mayor would have violated that because I had a financial interest in being a mayor. Same goes for a city councilor. Just by breathing, which is all we do is speak. All we do is speak when we're city councilors. It's called political speech, right? It's protected by the First and 14th Amendment. So you have political speech as a city councilor and as an acting mayor is protected speech. And that's all we do is speak. So if you can't speak as a city council because it's going to affect your chances of getting reelected for this financial position, you can't speak. You have to resign. So one of the reasons why you can't just move forward is because it's still hanging out there as a valid legal ruling.
At the hands of our own city solicitor, which even if you love him or hate him, you have to take this seriously. He is, after all, the appointed city solicitor.
That's the city of Gardner's legal opinion. It's the official legal opinion.
So within these four borders, within these four walls, this is how we do things.
It didn't come out as John Flick, private.
Can I ask you something? No, it'd be awesome. Can I just? We've had this has been a heavy conversation so far, which is cool, but we need to add a little bit of levity to it. Can we do a citizen's arrest when people start pulling papers in January? Like, at what moment can we do a citizen's arrest? I would love. I know people are going to roll their eyes, but I want to have a Michael Moore moment. I'll even be the guy. I'll go to City Hall. The second they pull papers, I'll put like plastic handcuffs and shit on people.
That's funny and stuff, but seriously, if
that's
somebody
opinion is though.
Say you're a citizen, right? Say you're a citizen and you're like, I've got this ruling saying that the executive can't run for re-election. I'm going to file a charge at Ethics Commission because he just took out nomination papers. I'm going to file it. Now you got to deal with a charge of ethics. I mean, nothing might happen from it. Obviously, nothing will happen because it's a bogus ruling, but you still got to deal with ethics. And still, it's not very nice knowing that you have a prison sentence hanging over your head. Like, for a while, it was like, and I was doubting myself, going, maybe it is. Maybe he did get that from ethics. Maybe it is right. Maybe something's screwy. Maybe I shouldn't do it. You start doubting yourself and stuff. So with the whole moving on thing too, if you're gonna have bad actors in government doing that kind of stuff, and you just say, well, let's just move on, and the same actors are there over and over again. Einstein said it. If you do the same thing over and over again, but you expect a different result, it's the definition of insanity. So at some point, it's like you got to correct things, right? Before you move on, and we have moved on. Obviously, Hawks in Westminster, town administrator, and Nicholson hammered me as he's got a massive mandate for mayor, and he's doing a pretty good job and all that. And so everything's moved on. But this thing, how does it move on when it isn't even resolved yet?
Well, we're going to find out more because, believe it or not, citizens of Gardner listening, we pull papers for the next election in another month and a half or 5 weeks or something like that, because this term, because it was a special election, only lasted for a year and a half, and it's already been 6 months. Yeah. So a mayoral election, believe it or not, as if we needed another one, is starting as early as February of 2021.
Yeah, people start getting ready for their campaigns. Even city council.
The second COVID election.
The papers aren't available for a little while. I don't know when. Maybe April or something. But people start getting their campaigns together in February, March.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. right.
So it's
That's
right
right.
around the corner, and but you know,
What do you think? I was
wait, just
hoping
one
you
last
would.
thing.
I was, you know what, Scott? I was hoping you were going to get into. So I'm going to mention it right now. And I do sound like a broken record. I've brought this up, I think, at least twice in earlier episodes, but it is that important. Here's why I think this is important. It's important because, and it has lasting effect on future elections, because process is at least as important. Political process is at least as important as the outcome. And I can tell you that in cases of pieces of municipal legislation that were important to me in the past, and the circumstances behind that getting passed or not, involved the cutting corners, or my thoughts were that it was about cutting corners in the process in order to get the end result. So even though the end result was something I wanted, I didn't like the process by which we were getting there. And because I spoke out about that fact, I would get excoriated by my fellow supporters of the outcome. That makes sense? You
Yeah,
know, we're going to vote, and this usually had to revolve around funding, school funding once, economic development funding on the other time. My point is this: it is so important in our democratic system, a system of laws, that processes, which are really like institutions, they are collectively the institution of our democracy or our democratic process. If we cut corners on them, if we disrespect them, then gradually the whole institution fails, it falls. And for every shortcut you take procedurally uh, today that is to your advantage, that same shortcut will be used down the road in a way that you will regret, right? And so you say, oh, well, you use that. So, um, and there's all different ways in which, for the last 40 or 50 years in particular, we've cut corners in processes. This feels like, to me, another one of those cases where somebody said, we're going to cut a corner, we're going to, or inhibit what otherwise would be a normal democratic process that we could all live to regret. We should already regret it happened the first time, but what about the next time? What if this kind of thing happens in virtually every mayoral election moving forward? And I'm not worried about what political faction wins or loses. I'm talking about the process falls apart, and
well,
every election comes this way. We already have pathetic percentages of voters voting in our municipal mayoral election. It will get to a point where 5 people, we're going to have Larry, Daryl, and like 2 other people that vote. And those 2 other people will be the people running for mayor, because everyone's going to give up on the process.
well, here's what you're right. And a lot, when process is actually in writing, when the process is in writing, like say for instance the U.S. Constitution or the city charter, when it's in writing, you're in pretty good shape. But some processes, like right now we're electing a city clerk, there's nothing in writing as to how to do it. So people get their subjective whims in there, and that's what you're getting at. When you start doing that, you can set some precedent, saying, "Well, that's how you did it before," So
Yeah.
there's a lot of that give and take in that situation. But when it comes from the city solicitor and Gardner, like for what happened to me, and this is why another reason why it can't just move on. When the city solicitor and Gardner issues an opinion, there's nothing you can do about it. Like in this case, right? It's not like that. I couldn't appeal something. I couldn't. I couldn't go with a grievance somewhere and say, "Hey, I think that is wrong," because that's the end of the road. Like now, if ethics had issued a ruling, like when somebody when somebody files a charge against your ethics, they'll do an investigation. If they find you violated it, they'll they'll issue a finding with the fines or whatever it is. Right? You can appeal that because it's an official decision of a governmental body. But
Sure.
when he goes and gets this legal ruling on the phone, this literally, and it's from the city solicitor law department of the city of Gardner, who won't give me any information, zero information about who he talked to, what day, what time, what was said by him, like what exactly did you? Maybe they didn't understand your question. wouldn't give me any information, right? Which, okay, now I just got your ruling, which is bogus, and I got my ruling, which this guy confirmed. My guy over the phone confirmed it, my state ethics attorney, and confirmed it in writing. So I have it in writing. So the thing is that, so this is the danger of some processes that you're getting at. There's nothing the person can do in my situation whatsoever. There's no avenue of appeal. So you got to live with that decision,
Well,
and
and
you have
it's
to
sort of
say,
like they
"Well, I got."
understood that. They understood maybe that you'd be disempowered. So we understand now that we think that this was like done, if we can't say maliciously, strategically, right? And
Again, I
we've
don't
got
have
to
any facts other. Just let me just be clear. I don't have any facts other than that the decision itself and the fact that both sides won't give me any information, which I find that odd too. Like if everything was above board and all, you know, legit, what?
right.
Why can't they
Should
say,
our
well, this is what
neighbors?
I asked them?
What if anything should our neighbors do about this? I mean, should people be calling the city solicitor and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" Should they be calling City Hall? Should they just be prepping for the next election? What is it that we all need to do?
I don't know.
Well, I'll let you answer that first. Yeah, you're not sure. You
No,
said
I have no idea. The thing is that I think you should be aware of what goes on. The public should be aware, and it's another reason why we do this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people like. That's public record. The email he sent me, public record. Um, all emails between city officials,
why
all
we
public
have this
record.
is why we have public meeting rule. This is why we have
Yeah,
public
that's all. So
records
you could.
law and so forth.
We have residents that just they do public records requests from time to time because they want to know what the city councils are talking about, right? And that's the law. You have to tell them. And so people should know exactly what's going on, things
I have
like that.
another question that's kind of unrelated but related to conflict of interest broadly, and that is it unusual in a city our size or any city like us or a bigger city for public officials like the conflict of interest? It seems to me like any number of times, and really now we know any number of reasons, whether they're legit or illegit, people can be called out for various conflict of interest, rulings. So is it unusual for the city figures to have any number of conflict of interest violations complained about on their head, or if you will? Or I don't know what the characterization is, but
It doesn't happen that way.
state at any given time could be investigating those individuals for conflict of interest.
It, you know what? Since I've been on the city council, I don't even know if I can remember one. Mine was the only one I can remember. It doesn't happen that often because
Doesn't happen. It's not
no, it
unusual.
doesn't. Open meeting law violations happen all the time because if you include one extra person on your email, you just violated the open meeting law. So that's easy to violate. Like, oh, I just hit reply all. Oh shit, you hit like a city councilor.
Yeah, it's
If
like
we
more than three people in on an email or in a room, and now it's going to say, well, five, is that what it
more
is?
than
Yeah.
five for us, and if you hit reply all by accident, you're screwed. But conflict of interest. That's why when I got this conflict of interest thing, I'm like, this is weird because it never happens. It's just like it'd have to be something like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And it doesn't happen in Gardner. I can't remember one, actually. To
Well,
be honest with you, I can't remember one
so,
except mine. It
so it's all
wasn't a
really interesting.
violation, but it was like, you are going to violate. If you win this acting mayor seat, you are going to violate the conflict of interest law. That's
Right.
almost as bad as getting a freaking violation handed to you.
Right. Well, this has been a fascinating and much more detailed than the first time around from a couple of weeks ago look at conflict of interest. And again, one of the main principles of us, the reasons why we created the podcast was this very thing, right? So we could actually get into explaining things to people, things that people should simply be aware of, that
Yeah.
how things work, you know what I mean? Because, and much of what, virtually everything we've talked about is never taught in any sort of standard civics class, K through 12. And it's important for all of us to know these things. We have an obligation as just regular old voting citizens to know
Right.
things.
And,
Now,
and, and yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. One last thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when you're elected representatives, like for instance on the city council, when their speech is stifled, or they have to self-censor, or they got to watch everything they say, that's not good for the citizenry. That's bad for the citizenry. You want your representatives to be able to get out there and have a robust conversation about everything. But when they say, well, you got to watch every word you say because you're running for re-election, and you're gonna buy, that's just, it's so anti-democratic that I can't even believe it. It's totally against the First Amendment and 14th Amendment. Freedom of speech.
Yeah, it smacks of that. It's not even like suggests it. It smacks of it.
Oh, believe me, it's direct.
So one last thing before we end episode 8, which has been fantastic hearing you talk about this, by the way. So, one friend to another. Now, we've been trying to, Cam involved in this as well. We're trying to think of different ways to enhance the show. And as we've done every couple of episodes or so, we try to add something. So we talked a little bit about this beforehand, but in doing the episode, I actually have had just a birth of inspiration. So we're going to start tonight. I want to implement, and you guys have to follow along with me because it's not exactly what we talked about in the beginning. We're going to implement a special feature of each episode, and we're calling it Totally Townie. Totally Townie, which is basically like an award, okay? And so each of us will have a person or persons, there's really no rules, that we nominate, and you have to state your reasons why too. So who it is and state your reasons why, and it can be more than one person. I guess I'll start off just to lead by example. My Totally Townie for episode 8 is City Solicitor John Flick. All right. Well, you've been listening to Scots on the Rocks Politica, episode 8. It's all about conflicts of interest. The full audio podcast will be live sometime tomorrow, Friday, December 11th. And we'll also have it out on video on our YouTube channel. We do have a particular YouTube channel. It is Two Scots Rocks Politica. And listen, subscribe, and you'll get up-to-the-minute updates. You can also subscribe to our podcast if you go to smgravesassociates.com/ Scots on the Rocks Politica. And actually, if you just go up to the main menu at the top, you can just click the buttons, and it's a hell of a lot easier to remember and so forth. And you can find a roster of all the episodes we've done up to this moment. We also will let you know that soon, coming in 2021, we are going to start a Patreon campaign. Yes, that's right, a Patreon campaign. And as part of that, there'll be various levels of subscription. So not only can you get the freemium model level of weekly Scots on the Rocks Political podcast, but we'll also start to implement, hint, hint, a digital written version, articles, special articles. We'll also have special episodes that you can only get through the paid subscription, at a certain level, and all kinds of products too. Did you know? I don't even know if I told you. We're gonna have T-shirts. We're gonna have hats.
Cool.
Mugs, tchotchkes, man, with our picture on them.
Yeah. What do they call it?
What's that?
Do they call it bling?
Bling. Tchotchkes, man. Yeah.
Cool.
So, Scott J. Graves, always a pleasure. You are always insightful. I thoroughly enjoy having you as a co-host.
Same here, SM Graves.
Cam, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Cam.
I'm always here. I'm always watching in the background.
We got to wake him up.
And thank you, Dave Grohl. This is, of all the podcasts that Cam and I produce, Cam is the quietest on the Scots on the Rocks Politica podcast.
This is your guys' court, it's not Scots and Cams on the rocks, so.
Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas, Dave Grohl, on the back poster there.
And Michael McDonald, too.
Michael McDonald.
Yeah, okay, Boomer. You've listened to Scots on the Rocks Politica. Good night.
Good night.